Hey everyone, my name is Claire. I am from the marketing and communications team here at CHJS. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry you have to see my face. Before you see Dr. Perry and Megan, the reason why you're here, we just wanted to say thank you so much for being here, and that this is the first of 6 conversations that we're hosting as part of a Nothing Heals Like Sport speaker series. If you have been following us on all of our channels and on our emails, if you're even an ambassador, we've kicked off this Nothing Heals Like Sport campaign late last year, and this is one of our first really big initiatives and opportunities to really drive home that nothing heals like sport. So if you're in Chicago next month, if you're in Boston in August, if you're in neither and just want to continue to join us through YouTube, a lot of those details will be provided on our email, our newsletter, our socials. So if you don't follow us, please follow us at CHJSORG. And without further ado, I'm going to get out of here so you can have this conversation or enjoy this conversation with Megan and Dr. Perry about Nothing Heals Like Sport. Thanks.
Great. Well, yes. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We are
My pleasure.
We are starting a series of conversations with folks who are doing really interesting and cool things with young people. And we want to talk to them about how sport can and should be part of the conversation. I think there are lots of ways that sport is being sort of left out of conversations where it could be a value add to the work that a lot of folks are doing, to the work.
Or I might interrupt and say, not a value add. We should center it. I mean, that's part of the problem is that, in the middle of all of this conversation about mental health challenges and depression and anxiety and screen time and all of that stuff that's dominating our conversations about youth, nobody's really centering sport the way they should.
Great. I'll pay you for that later. For that answer.
Sure. Take that little soundbite. There you go.
Give it to everybody. But I appreciate that because I think obviously that's our hope, is that this gets to be a more central part of these conversations. That if you are talking about the mental health crisis that young people are facing, if you're talking about the isolation and the long-term effects of COVID, the immediate effects of a chaotic political environment, all of those things are contributing to it being hard for young people to be in the world. And we are hoping that sport can be a part of the conversation for how to help support young people. And so we're going to do a series of these conversations talking to people who have done really amazing work supporting young people. And hopefully we'll be able to convince some folks to think twice about the role of sport in this space. So
awesome. I'm in.
We couldn't start this conversation without you, because whenever we make the case that sport should be part of the solution for supporting young people, the reason that people listen to us is because of you. The reason people listen to us is because we are able to back up what we're saying with the science of what young people need, the science of how young people thrive. And that's because, and the vast majority of that for us has been based on getting to know your work, getting to know you, and getting to think about ways that it can show up in sport. So.
Well, I'm happy to be on this, in this conversation with you. And we've talked about this a number of times, that so many of the good things about sport are targeting specifically the needs of a person across a spectrum of domains, right? A lot of people, when they think about sport, they kind of think about physical activity, and if they think a little bit deeper, they go, oh, it's cardiorespiratory fitness, that's good. Or they think about something like, weight control, or learn developing good habits about exercise. All that's true. But at the core of sport is this fundamental relational experience that is foundational to human health and wellness. And the combination of pattern, repetitive, rhythmic activities in connection with people who see you and care for you and you belong with, those are the essential ingredients of health and wellness. And study after study after study after study, whether you're looking at it through the lens of public health or looking at it through the lens of some specific physical problem like diabetes or heart disease or all of that, or looking at it through the lens of mental health, every single one of those things converges on the power of being in connection, the importance of pattern, repetitive, rhythmic activities, and essentially this sense of belonging. And I think that sport does that probably as well as any other human cultural endeavor. Now, of course, we've talked about this before, but like if you do dance, if you do orchestra, if you do drama, all of those things also have those elements. But I think that sport has a really unique role in creating a healthy community, healthy culture, healthy person.
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's so funny because, like you said, study after study after study says these things are important, right? That where all the studies on sort of academic performance say it's better if young people move their bodies. And yet we're still taking recess out of schools. We're still taking, we still don't sort of center movement as part of the educational experience. And then the same is true for the research that talks about relationships. And then we're still sort of, I don't know, there still always seems to be a resistance to how powerful or how scientific or how something relationships are. They sort of like, and I think that that's part of why we haven't been able to convince enough people that sport is part of the, needs to be part of this conversation, because there's this idea maybe that relationships are soft or something, right? I think that, but one of the times that I notice people having aha moments when we talk about the, sort of some of the core concepts of your work, of the neurosequential model, is that when we can actually talk about why relationships are so protective, when we can sort of help people understand what it does for a young person who, any young person, but a young person who's experienced some kind of adversity, then I think we start to see, oh, this isn't just somebody telling me to be nice to kids. It's somebody telling me what's going on in their brain when I am nice to them.
Yeah. Well, I think the impact of our work has been connected to our capacity to translate these complex concepts about the brain into simpler but still accurate concepts. And the amazing thing about the brain, the human brain, is just astoundingly complex. But there are these fundamental simplicities that you can pull out of that complexity and teach without having to make somebody a neuroscientist. And this is a part of what we've been trying to do over the last 30 years. And one of the key things is that there is a physiology, there's a neurobiology to being in connection with another person. Once you sort of remember that, oh yeah, in order for me to see somebody, I have to have a sensory input through the eyes that go into the brain that get processed in a certain way. And when somebody touches me or when I hear some words, all of that is essentially physiological. So when you have a relational interaction, that's physiological. It changes the biology of your brain. It activates certain systems. It makes certain systems light up and other systems sort of shut down. So like if you're really afraid and you get into connection with somebody who you feel safe with, literally it will quiet down your stress response system, and it will activate the systems in your brain that give you a sense of pleasure and contentment. And so again, when you explain this to people in ways that they can connect with and remind them about things in their own life, then they go, oh yeah, that's right. I remember when I walked into that room full of people that I didn't know and I felt really uncomfortable. Well, that's biology. There's a biological thing going on in your brain. And then you remember how you felt when you recognized somebody and they recognized you, and you felt all of a sudden, oh, it's okay. They know me, and they pulled you in and you felt different. And once you help people connect with that, I think it's easier to make these arguments about the power of a relationally based teaching approach or a relationally based experience with sport or drama or any other human endeavor where there's a group of people that come together and do something for a common purpose. Again, sport is one of the I think one of the most powerful ways that happens in the lives of kids. You can even see it when you literally at recess with third graders, when they temporarily team up and transiently create a group. And within minutes, there's a sense of us versus them. And yay, we won versus, oh, we lost, there's this powerful neurobiological part of us that pulls us to connect. And sport just taps into that in a beautiful way and then uses that as a vehicle for teaching kids how to cooperate, how to share, how to read and respond to other people. And you get a sense of, I can communicate with this person while I'm running at full speed. And I just glance over at them and I know they're going for the goal. And I know that I need to pass to them. That kind of thing that happens in basketball and soccer and football, that sort of the nuanced capacity to communicate, that reinforces this neurobiology of connection for people. And you feel really close to somebody when that happens. And so you can have somebody with completely different skills, completely different interests, completely different backgrounds. But if they actually have an assist and a goal, they come together and they high five and they celebrate together. And that's a physiological moment that reinforces this power of connectedness. And that happens in sport, I think, unlike anything else. You don't see, it can happen in music. It can happen, people really love playing together, but they don't usually high five after they do a really good, transition in the chord. They probably should. Let's bang our bows together.
I think we're talking about relationship. We talked about movement, and I do think that is one element that sport that's maybe marching band, but sport has in sort of a different dose than some of the other ways in which you get to interact with other people. So the opportunity to move. Can you talk about why that sort of, if you're in this relationally mediated environment, why adding movement to that is all, sort of upping the ante in terms of the impact on young people?
Yeah, and it's just, if I get too geeky on this, you guys just slap me down. But
never.
So the way we've been trying to help people understand this is that your brain is incredibly complex, 86 billion neurons plus all kinds of other important cells and everything that come together that allow you to kind of make your way through the world. And we have these sensory apparatus, our eyes, our ears, we can sensory things in our skin. So we literally are monitoring the outside world all the time, but we're also monitoring our own internal world. And this internal world is, do I have enough oxygen? Do I have enough fluid? Am I dehydrated? Should I get some more salt? Do I need more glucose? All of that stuff is just sort of kind of keeping track of, ensuring that you're okay. And all that stuff comes into the lower part of your brain. And so envision your brain as this upside down triangle. And the lower part of your brain has these systems that are continually getting this input. And then depending upon what you need, there will be systems here that will then go, oh, I need to breathe more frequently, or I need to stop moving so I can actually might catch my breath, or I need to be nice to this person so that they will do something for me and get some need met. And so as you go, the solutions that your
If you're
brain,
the parent of a young child, right? You're saying,
yes,
oh, you're
yes,
sleep parent of a young child. You need more of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so your brain has these different systems that kind of do different things, right? So we all know, everybody knows that humans can think, and humans can feel, and humans can move. Now, all those systems are kind of mediated by different parts of your brain. But when you're little, when you are in utero and your brain and body are just organizing, you haven't yet organized all of these systems. You haven't built the emotional systems, and you haven't built the thinking systems in your brain, and you haven't even built the moving systems very much. But you're just beginning to build these kind of regulatory systems in the lower part of the brain. So because all of your neurons are separate, they're literally physically separate. There's a boundary between one cell and another. The way they connect with each other and communicate is through what we call synapses. And so the creation of synapses and the building of synapses is really one of the major tasks of early development in the brain. And you continue to do this as you get older, but it's very, very, very explosively robust early in life and in utero. And one of the key things that your brain is trying to do is trying to figure out what's out there and what's inside. And so your brain's trying to, we call it, make sense of the world. The way we do that is that we use patterned, we essentially make associations. We make connections between sensory activities that co-occur, right? So things that come in through the visual system, and then things are coming in through the auditory system, pretty soon you connect them. And the sound that you hear on the street of a siren becomes connected to the vision of a car, big red truck going by. And then later on you connect that to, fires. And then you connect that to, other kinds of sirens that, that's a car, that's a blue car, and that's a policeman versus a fire truck. And your brain begins to make sense out of what's going on out there by building these interconnected networks. Now, when you're in utero, these regulatory networks down here that are involved in the stress response and kind of keeping you in balance, they're organizing when you're in your a little fetal brain, and you're getting continuous nonstop feedback from the fetal body, your little fetal body, that says, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, I'm not cold, because you're at body temperature of your mother, and you are getting nonstop calories, and you're getting oxygen. So you don't really have any physiological needs that are unmet. So you send the signals from the body that say, hey, I have what I need. I'm regulated. I'm regulated. I'm regulated. I'm regulated. But you also are getting input from the outside world, outside of the fetus. You're having a nonstop, which is from the mother's heart rate. And the blood rushing through the aorta causes a zzz, zzz, zzz. And there's a push. There's a push from the heartbeat going boom, boom, boom. So you get 3 different sensory inputs are coming into the lower part of the brain at the same time that you're getting the signal that you're regulated. And so what happens is, in utero, and the entire time you're developing, your brain is organizing in rhythm. And the pattern, repetitive, rhythmic activities that you experience are connected with being regulated and safe. And so after you're born and you're dysregulated, because what the hell? It's 72 degrees. It's not 98.7. This is cold. And you're not getting nonstop calories. So the signals from your body are like, where's my food? And so you are distressed. You're dysregulated. You're out of balance. And so you cry out. You can't go make yourself a sandwich. You can't really self-regulate. You have to depend upon somebody to come and regulate you and calm you down and feed you and comfort you and warm you. So you cry. And then here comes mom, dad, auntie, nurse, whoever it is, and they wrap you up. You replicate intrauterine sensory cues that are associated with being regulated. So you can actually take a hungry baby who's still hungry, and you can wrap them up and you can rock them at a frequency and go, oh, it's okay. And the prosody of your voice and the compressed touch, that's enough of the sensory memory of being regulated that they stop crying. They're still hungry, but you've regulated them. So what happens is, as you get older, as an infant, again, pattern, repetitive, rhythmic activity, rocking, the prosody of the singing, the back and forth rhythm of and most people don't recognize this, but when you gaze at the baby, you do it for a little while, and then you break gaze, and then they fuss, and then you come back again. That's rhythmic too. So all of these syncopated rhythms are reinforcing that powerful connection between patterned, repetitive, rhythmic sensory input and being regulated. So as you get older, when you go running on the playground, you feel better. When you go swing on the swings, you feel better. When you color, you feel better. You color on the wall. Oh, I'm not supposed to color on the wall. Sorry. It felt so good. It felt so good. So regulating. But, you learn all over time that there are certain socially acceptable pattern, repetitive, rhythmic things, right? Sucking your thumb feels good. Rocking feels good. But we don't need to suck your thumb in the fourth grade, so we try to replace that. And what happens is, as your brain develops, and you've heard me say this a million times, a smoothly regulated set of systems in the lower part of the brain helps send important, healthy signals to the developing higher parts of the brain. And so being in regulation means that you will have a development of higher systems in the brain that are going to be incredibly functional and optimal. And later on, when you get dysregulated, you get hungry, thirsty, cold, frustrated, sad, scared. What do? Everybody has some form of self-regulatory pattern, repetitive rhythm. It might be chewing gum. It might be wiggling your leg. It might be tapping a pencil. It might be doodling in a class where you're so bored. It might be whatever it is. It's just this powerful built-in capability. Sport takes advantage of that and reinforces that. You get to the point where you can tolerate training at a certain level of discomfort because there's the regulatory part of repetitive rhythmic breathing and the stride at a certain pace. Anybody who's done any running knows that there's a part of the run where you feel really uncomfortable. You're like, God, I know that this sucks, and you kind of want to stop because it's like not good. But then you find some rhythm, right? You get your breathing into a certain rhythm and get your pacing into a certain rhythm. And if somebody breaks that rhythm, then you're much more likely to feel the discomfort. This happens with distance runners all the time in a race, for example. That if you're running at a certain rhythm and somebody forces you to break stride, the interesting thing is it also forces you to feel the discomfort again more than you would have otherwise. And I'm off on a tangent. Sorry, this is like way. Anyway, sorry, but sport is good.
Yeah.
Sport is good. Fire bad, sport good.
No, but I think it's such this again, I think you said right at the beginning, this idea of sport can be good from a physical perspective is more generally accepted, understood. When people think about sport, maybe, yeah, you're doing cardiovascular training, that's good for you. You're managing weight, that's good for you. You're doing a lot of things that are good for you. And I think the part they don't understand is how regulating that movement can be. And so that when you put the combination of that movement with the positive effects of, if we do sport right, having the consistent input of positive relational cues with another adult, with a group of peers who, you want to, who you have a positive relationship with too, when you put those two things together in a unique way, I, because I'm me, call that magic. You, because you're you, call that science. So,
Well,
but
and the thing, Megan, that's so powerful about sport, and we've talked about this a lot, is that because of the combination of these things, that you've got this relational environment where you belong, which is regulating, and you're doing pattern repetitive things that are regulating, you are essentially capable of tolerating a higher challenge of duress, cardiorespiratory duress, the duress of competition, the duress of performance in front of peers. All of these things are stressors. And so when sport goes well and you're in an environment where you go perform outside of your comfort zone, you're activating your stress response in this moderate way, but it's not an intolerable degree of activation. It's not an impossible challenge. And what we know about stress is that it's actually good for you. But it has to be moderate. And if it's moderate, predictable, and it has elements of controllability, it builds resilience. In other words, you get more capable of dealing with other stressors by doing sport. So when you compete, either you're competing for a position on the team, is sort of the internal team competition, and then there's competition with other teams. Each one of those have a different level of activation, and then you get back to your baseline. And what helps you get back to your baseline is the presence and positive attention of coach, teammates, and other folks really play a major role in helping both moderate and then regulate somebody who is in the midst of some kind of performance. And again, we talk about resilience all the time. People throw that word around all the time, I think sometimes without really understanding it. But there is nothing that is more resilience building than a performance activity, whether it's the performance of getting up and giving a presentation, or the performance of band or orchestra, or the performance in sport. And all of those things create opportunities for moderate, predictable activation of the stress response system in ways that expand the capacity of the individual to then deal with the rest of life. The challenges at home, the challenges in the neighborhood, the challenges in the classroom. You will be better equipped for all of that if you have built your stress response system's resilience capabilities through sport. And I think that's one of the most powerful and positive aspects of sport. And I think it's one of the most misunderstood powers of sport. People have this fantasy that you can build resilience by sitting in a classroom and having a lecture about stuff, and you just can't. Real resilience is performance build. It's not built. It's not cognitive. It's not an intellectual thing. Now,
I've now
mindset
decided
can
to be
help,
more, yeah, I've now decided to be more resilient.
right?
Right.
And I think that one of the things that a lot of our adult world wants to do with kids that are in situations where they're impoverished and distress, all kinds of distressing things going on, they want to kind of talk them out of it. Oh, let's teach you to be resilient. Well, you don't teach people to be resilient. you provide opportunities for children to build resilience, but those opportunities have to have all the elements that sport has. And there are very few things in the traditional educational environment that can do that. And none of them are centered, right? Almost all of the true resilience building activities in education are marginalized. They're considered, add-ons, drama, performing arts, other performing arts, sport. They're like add-ons.
Like I said, like I say, sport is magic. Like you say, sport is doing all the things that we want that we want it to do because of what we know about the brain, what kids actually need, right? You always talk about things, activities that are biologically respectful of what a young person needs, whether they're dysregulated, whether they're just trying to learn from a pretty well regulated baseline. The things they need are not always accomplished by sitting at a desk. The One of the other things that I always think about when I think about why or how sport could be better utilized to help support young people who are experiencing mental health challenges, or sort of in this moment when we're fighting sort of technology, we're fighting isolation, we're fighting an extra level of chaos in our lives, is when you talk about sort of the way in which sport provides more the right kind of relational dosing for kids, as opposed to this idea that you get your sort of therapeutic dose in 50-minute increments.
Right. Yeah. I struggle with how to teach people about this. And I think the easiest way to remind people about how important the moment is, and is to think back on when you were falling in love with somebody. With the first time somebody said to you, I think I love you, and you're like, whoa. And that's this powerful moment. There's a sense of connection. And that's awesome. And how long was that? 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now the interesting thing is, about an hour later, you're like, I really want to hear that again. It's like that. It doesn't last, right? It's not like you get, I said I love you 20 years ago. I mean, what are you whining about? It doesn't last. It's a moment, right? It's powerful. It's like, it's a real thing. There, you feel the physiological change, right? It's like, oh my God. But then, and you can think back on it, right? So like if they say, I love you, and then you go out, wander off, and they go, oh, I know she loves me. But then you're like, oh, I want to hear it again. Tell me again. No, you hang up. I'll hang up. No, you hang up. Yep. You want to hear it again. It's doses of tiny little fully present moments. So let me give you an example of this. I have this great opportunity to kind of be an assistant coach for an elementary school track team over here. Amazing. We won the city championship, by the way, again.
Yeah, just P.S.
Of course, by the way. Bobby led us to victory. But there was one of these kids love being seen by the coach, right? They love you to know their name. And I don't really know them that well, so I have to give them nicknames, right? Because I'm not with them all day in school, so I don't know everybody's names, especially the new kids. And so there's a tiny little girl who's sweet and really pretty good, but she's so small. And I started calling her Mighty Mouse, and so I went up and said to her, is it okay if I know I called you Mighty Mouse, that's a nickname. Is that okay? And she says, oh yeah, that's great. I said, okay. And within 5 minutes, all these kids came over and said, what's my nickname? What's my nickname? What's my nickname? And so I had to give nicknames to all these kids. It took a while to kind of keep it straight, but it's just, they love being seen. And so when they'd be running around the track, I'd say, come on, Mighty Mouse. And that moment, what did that take? 5 seconds? But that's the kind of moment that kids need. They need a fully present, somebody paying attention to them, seeing them. It doesn't have to be an hour. But the beauty of sport is that you've got a coach, you've got teammates, you've got other parents around if they're observing, and you can have these tiny little moments of regulation and reward that end up providing the physiologically meaningful pattern of relational interaction that makes an enduring change. Whereas if I saw one of those kids in my office and we were sitting and doing like conventional, let me interact with, I would not get anywhere near the same level of connection as just by being around, episodically, fully seeing them and making them feel that. And I think that that's one of the things that can happen with a really good teacher, can happen with coaching and parenting too, that we misunderstand this, the dosing of relational connection. And I think that that's something that we keep trying to help people understand, because it really is going to lead to a difference in the way we actually construct mental health and wellness programs in the future. It's not about getting more people trained to do this higher order technique-based therapeutic stuff. It's about creating environments where there's more people around to see someone in a continuous way over the course of a day. And that leads to kind of the relational connectedness that and relational experiences that change the biology of the body and the brain.
Yeah, I think you've talked before about the not just sort of the switch in terms of creating environments where there's more consistent, micro doses of that relationship, which is important both because it's more, biologically respectful of what a young person needs, but it's also more practical from a scale perspective, right? We're never going to have enough
Exactly.
fully trained
Exactly.
therapists
Right.
who can do that higher that and we need them. They need to exist so that the people who need that have it, but that the sort of need for more broad public health solutions where everybody is contributing to a young person having those positive relational moments is what some of the value of sport and these other activities can really contribute.
Exactly. And I think this is why I think our field and sport is included in that, particularly after school programs, community recreational facilities, creating spaces and times when people can be in community is really important for solving these problems. And again, we tend to want to focus on, how are we going to give more money to the medical schools so they can train more people? And I say, no, let's give more money to the community so they can build a nicer community space where there can be softball leagues and, kids can have, all manner of recreational opportunities where these things can take place, and where you can pull people from the community into the process of creating health and wellness. There's most of our communities are filled with people that have a lot to give who just aren't being valued. They're marginalized, and they would love to be engaged as like a volunteer to do this, to go to the community center and have some coffee with some friends. And then I'm going to go out and teach kids how to macrame or whatever it is that my skill is. We just need more spaces.
I happened to, this is a total accident, and wildly good luck that I happen to live on a dead end with like 7 houses, and in 4 of them there are a total of 7 kids under 6. And so now that the weather is getting nice again, everybody's just doors are open and everybody's just out on the street every evening. And I think all the time about how much more powerful it is that my 5-year-old is getting those positive, hey, Jack, how was your day today from the neighbor, in addition, as opposed to being inside with me and my husband just trying to entertain him ourselves, or or, sometimes putting him in front of a screen, or all, just even in those short hours on a weekday evening where he gets all of that extra chance to be seen by other people, and how powerful that is and how rare that is.
And again, I think that that's such an important part of a healthy community, is being in proximity with older kids and other adults. And because I think you're absolutely right that sense of relational community is where you're going to have those doses of being seen and being connected. I was fortunate enough to grow up in that kind of environment, and we would get 25 kids every night in the summer in a kick the can thing, and there would be I was more afraid of my neighbor disciplining me than my parents, and this, it was just that kind of sense of connectedness in a community is very powerful and important.
Yeah, I do. And I think in a lot of the communities where we spend a lot of time, sport spaces are sometimes the only spaces that communities have to do that. Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to help us sort of, I think, set the stage for conversations about why sport can be a, a more robust part of the conversation that people are having about mental health, but about, sort of general well-being and thriving for young people. Um, and like I said, we constantly refer to the work that you've done to help make that case, because it I do think when people understand even these small bits of the complexity of the brain, it really is transformative.
Yeah, the thing that's, I think there's this intimidation factor that people need to get over, and that's a part of what we've been trying to do. Is again, the complexity is astounding, and it's beyond the comprehension of any individual on the planet. I mean, the most well-trained senior neuroscientist only knows a fraction of what there is, and what we do know is only a fraction of what we will know. Now, within that, however, are these beautiful simplicities about how the brain works and how the brain processes and how the brain helps us connect. And I think that the things that you teach and the way you've distilled and digested a lot of the stuff and teach it is really important, because there's no need to be intimidated by an understanding of, for example, state-dependent functioning. Everybody experiences it, and you explain it for 2 minutes and people go, oh, of course. Right. Everybody's forgotten a name in a conversation that as soon as they're driving away, they remember the name. Right. That's state-dependent functioning. Right. Everybody's had to do some kind of performance-based thing, either at work or at church or wherever, and they kind of like fumble a line or whatever. That's state-dependent functioning.
Yeah. Somebody's always, I guess I've heard that someone has said something to their partner that they didn't mean in the moment because they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when
that's never happened. I don't know. Speak for yourself. I'm Mr. Clear Communication here.
I do think that, that is for us this, once you see it, you can never unsee it, right? That's what we find with coaches, is that once they understand something like state-dependent functioning, once they understand what the real power of relationship building is, what the real power of those relational doses is, once they understand that movement is actually regulating, as opposed to telling a kid who's dysregulated to sit and be quiet. And once they understand that resilience, that what they're doing on the sport field is actually building resilience that young people can use in other parts of their lives, once they start to understand these things, then I really do think that's the lens they're pushing everything through. And so there's no like magic way to coach this like this. other than consistently pushing every coaching scenario through that new set of knowledge.
It's as you were speaking, one of the things that struck me is that we do end up teaching about this stuff to coaches, right? I mean, that's kind of what a lot of what you guys do. What we really need to do is reach people who don't know about sport, don't appreciate sport, and make major decisions about sport.
Right. About where resources go.
Yeah. Right. So this is part of the kind of the next step, I think, is engaging and helping people understand universally, not just coaches and not just people engaged in sport, but like the people that on school boards and people that are funders and people that are out there that continue to view sport as this nice supplemental add-on that's dispensable, right? It's the first thing that has to go is going to be sport and band, because God forbid we cut algebra. But the reality is everybody will do better in algebra if they've had an opportunity to get regulated before they hear about algebra. And as study after study has shown, they will stick the concepts of algebra more efficiently if they have sport or recess or physical activity after they have had the lesson. And again, all the stuff we teach about dosing and spacing is relevant for cognitive acquisition of information. And so I really do think that I keep saying it. I mean, to educators whenever I have an opportunity about how powerful sport is, but we'll get there. It's going to take time. I mean, the wonderful thing about things that are true is that ultimately we get there. I mean, sometimes it takes several generations, but we're on a trajectory for people to begin to understand and value it again. The most interesting thing is if you look at classical education, the Greeks, when as part of their classical education for their wealthy aristocratic students that basically formed the basis of all Western civilization, they gave as much emphasis to athletics and music as they did to anything else. And when you look at other cultures, same thing. They gave as much value to learning martial arts or variations of that as they did to learning how to print and draw and learn other things. There is a universal cultural understanding across every culture that's emerged about the power and importance of movement, sport competition, music performance. It's something that we just, for whatever reason, we've put sport off into some upper shelf. It's on the top shelf in the back room, and we need to bring it out and put it on the middle of the kitchen table.
Well, thanks for helping us try and do that, get it into more young people's experiences.
Anytime.